toward Purim. It's so lovely to see, as I always say, all of you and each of you, because each is a separate pleasure. And sometimes we work even on the level of the invisible. If you recall, last time I mentioned that our dear Bella Hochberg had taken a kapara tumble in Florida, and thank God she is recuperating rapidly. I hope God is listening. And thank God this time she is at least well enough to join us by phone. So we have Bella here on the table. Gives new meaning to the word front seat. And Imir Hashem, I don't know how many more shiurim we might have to keep her on the table, but Imir Hashem, she will very soon be back in her regular chair, because although it is lovely to hear her voice and her laugh coming to us from Florida, it will be very nice when her beautiful smile can join them and all be with us together. I would also like to extend, as always, our appreciation to the Magic House of Torah for welcoming us this morning. Thank you, Sharon, so much. And to the SDC, which, once again, it is on days like this that you especially appreciate your umbrella, and they have given us the umbrella for the shiurim, and we're delighted. And v'haraya, everybody in the room is dry, so I guess it's working. Also, as always, I just want to express great thanks to Rina Banyuk, who is the education chair of SDC. I decided we needed to give her a title, which is a task which comes with so much work, because it begins by nudging me. Wouldn't you like to give a shiur for so and so? She usually takes about 2 or 3 no's. Then comes the extraction of a date. Those of you who are dentists, what she has to do is the equivalent of root canal. It's not just a regular extraction. Following this, she usually gets the source sheet emailed to her 60 or 80 seconds before the shiur time. And then she also serves as camera lady to make sure that this fascinating road to sideshow can be recorded for posterity, by which we mean the 3 people who watch it on the internet when their cable service goes down. At any rate, please feel free to pass around the pages at this point, even though I should be giving my usual warm-up introduction as per my instructions. However, the text of the Megillah is relatively well-known, so that I will, in fact, just be reminding you there will be very few revelations. There is, however, a theoretical construct. The theoretical construct is the following. It is generally brooded about that the Torah helps us to understand the world around us. And that is, that is the basis of many sermons and divrei Torah, etc., etc. I would like to question this premise because it makes it sound like the priority is the world, and secondary is the Torah, which provides us with the keys. I think perhaps it is the opposite. And I think it is that the experience of living in history opens our eyes when we daven every day, V'hoyer eineinu b'sorosecha, enlighten our eyes in your Torah, that there are aspects of the Torah which without experiences, one simply passes over and they remain invisible. So I believe that it is not the Torah which guides us in life, but it is also life which guides us to an understanding of the Torah. And I say that because, Shia, may I make a suggestion? Where are you? Do you have this on a WhatsApp call?
Yes.
You need to do a regular, because the WhatsApp went down and now it's trying to reconnect. If you think you have enough battery and minutes, put Bella on a regular call, if you don't mind. Bella, are you there? See, we lost her because of the WhatsApp is so.
The next WhatsApp that happened to me last week.
Yeah, the WhatsApp is unreliable. So I would like to read a couple of passages of the Megillah in light of this proposition, and that is that I am not, so to speak, manipulating the text. I hope I'm not manipulating the Megillah in order to make it seem relevant. There are two words which I believe are overrated in their use. They are relevant and passionate. If those two words could be retired for a little while, let them lie fallow like a field. Perhaps they would come back with some more fertility. Right now, I'm afraid they've just spiraled down to
And become more relevant.
less than nothing. No, but I might be a little more passionate about that. Thank you, Doc. At any rate, so that is my argument, that this view of the Megillah, although at certain points it may sound, it may sound like it's referential. It is really the state of mind which I believe illuminates things which are in the Megillah and which certainly are in the ways in which Chazal took the interpretation of the Megillah. That will be helpful. That said, let's get started. Everyone knows, I have referred many times in past shiurim to the concept of the pantry. The pantry is a set of facts that the teachers of the past assumed that the people in the audience already knew. Right? That's the definition of what we call a famous Rashi. Right? So I could tell you a Rashi that, with the possible exception of Buddy Skydell, no one will recognize. However, there are other Rashis which I could quote to you, and you say, I've heard so many rabbis talk about that Rashi, I'm tired from it already. Right? So that's how Rashis get to be famous. You get famous if you're in the pantry. One of the things which is in our pantry, what is a fact? This is going to be a test, pantry test. What is an unusual fact about Megillat Esther? Namely, namely something which is not in it. What is famous, what is, as yeshivish jargon would say, what is famously absent in the book of Esther? The name of God. You hear the pantry whispering to us. I might have my excellent reception. Okay, just keep going. Just keep going. All right, but if need be prepared to push this button. Bella, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Okie dokie. If we lose you, if we lose the connection, I'm calling you back on my phone, okay?
Okay.
Because the South African hardware is seldom reliable. They make it out of elephant tusks or something. I don't know what it is.
Excuse me.
The lobby has been heard from. We're in trouble. We just lost the South African vote. Okay. In the pantry, everyone knows that the name of God is absent from the Megillah. But if you look carefully at the Megillah, there is something else which is equally absent. You see, it is not only the God of Israel who is not present in a clear way in the Megillah. There is actually, and if someone knows different, there is no deity. In other words, if you look in the other Svarim of the Tanakh, the name of the competition is always quite clear. So, I mean, we know this one's worshiping Baal, and this one's worshiping Molech, etc., etc. Everyone's got a religion, except in the book of Esther. In the book of Esther, what is the dominating energy in the book of Esther? I would argue that the dominant energy in Megillat Esther is social anxiety. And social anxiety as it is manifest in a political system. Now, where do you see this nexus of the political and the social? Well, you would see it, for example, in the pre-revolutionary courts in France, where all of the politics was affected by the relationships among those who were quote unquote at court. So every party, if you know something about the history of Marie Antoinette's arrival in the French court, the whole question of the most intimate things, who was allowed to help her get dressed, was a function of the power hierarchy among the women of the court. People, could you speak to her before she spoke to you? All of these issues were connected to the political life of France, to the question of the succession, to the question of waging war. All of the decisions were reached in this hothouse of plots and insults and remarks. Everything was quite cloistered. If I were one of those directors who was interested in taking a story and retelling it in another time period, they're always doing that with Shakespeare. Let's tell Hamlet on the barrio or something of that nature, right? The most perfect transposition of the Megillat Esther would be probably to the French court of the 18th century.
Yeah, the Queen famously said, if they don't have bread, let them go to the pantry.
I tell you, between the right and the left here, I feel unsafe. I would like to get another. Good one. Good one. So let's begin to examine some little riddles that, with this in mind, begin to be explained. Let's go to our second paragraph, first of all, right? Where it says Esther Perek Gimel. And there it says, and we'll come back to these words in a minute. Of course, one second, I did bring glasses this time. I learned my lesson. Excuse me. Yep. Muster again. Okay, Bella, you're with us? Can you hear me? Okay, good. Okay, so let's look at this second paragraph. And we're going to come back to the connectors here. Achar Advarim ha'eleh. This is the moment when Haman is elevated. Now let's look at the third pasuk. right? Which is in the wake of Mordechai's decision not to bow to Haman. And the servants of the king who were in the gate of the king said to Mordechai, Madua ata over es mitzvahs hamelech? Why are you disobeying the commandment of the king? Vayihi be'omram, or ke'omram elov yom v'yom, and it was as they spoke to him day in and day out, v'lo shama alehem, and he did not listen to them. Now here the Alshich notes something quite interesting. So I'll ask you a wonderful question. When an anti-Semit has the opportunity to undermine the standing and the credibility of a Jew, how long does it generally take them to utilize that opportunity, to capitalize?
Blink of an eye.
Blink of an eye, says Sonia. Correct. However, here we have this strange hesitancy. Mordechai is sitting b'shar HaMelech, which Chazal tell us he was occupying a position of some standing, and it may even be that he himself replaced big son Zeresh, and that is why they were upset in the previous paragraph. So he is occupying a position. The king has just appointed Haman, and we'll talk in a moment where that comes from. The king has appointed Haman, and everyone bows down. Mordechai is the one abstention.
And he does so publicly.
But okay, he does it publicly. So er sein gesunden stark. So I would have thought, take him out and shoot him. Don't forget, no one knows he's actually related to Esther at this point. Take him and shoot him. No. They talk to him, they ask him again and again and again. Why? Well, it tells you two things. Number one, it tells you that in this context, we are not actually dealing with anti-Semitism per se. Haman is the first one who says that he has learned that Mordechai is a Jew, and therefore he wants a more thoroughgoing annihilation. It's not enough just to kill one person. But in the court, remember we're in the court, that seems not to be the issue. The issue is not that Mordechai is a Jew. What is Mordechai? Why are they talking to him? The answer, I believe, is that this is a court where people almost slavishly they look around to see what is everybody doing. They follow public opinion. They follow the majority. And sometimes this is a response to what? To the whim of the king. We don't want to displease him. We'll see this also is a factor. So everyone is doing it. What is the one thing that can unsettle people? If one person says to them, I'm not doing it. Why? Because their commitment to any line of action is based on the sense of consensus that everyone around agrees with them. One person disagrees, and this is a terrible irritant. When they speak to Mordechai, when they speak to him again and again, day in and day out, it is why they actually like Mordechai. They are pleading with him, please just join us. Why do you have to stand apart? You're dividing the court. Just go along. Don't be such an auction.
Don't make waves.
Don't make waves, and Mordechai refuses. And he says, Vayagidu lo Haman, lir'os hayamdu divrei Mordechai, ki higid lohem asher hu Yehudi. What does that mean? To see if Mordechai's words will stand. Notice they don't report to the king because they've said the problem is he's violated the word of the king. Instead, they pass this along to Haman as if to say, well, Mordechai, we know that you'll be very brave when he's not around, when you're not facing him. But when you have to look him in the eye, none of us like him any more than you do. But when you have to look him in the eye, you'll buckle as well. And here again, Mordechai remains steadfast. Now Chazal understood that Haman affixed to himself symbols of idolatry. Right? And that is Chazal's way of understanding what was it that Mordechai resisted. I would very tentatively suggest that this is a book in which no one else seems to be very concerned with idols or alternative belief systems. I would suggest, again I say very tentatively, that the divinity that Mordechai is resisting is the divinity of this social consensus. That one acts just because everyone is doing it. That one is always to be blown by such a wind. And when they see this in him, how do they conceive it? Notice again, the Shem Hashem does not appear, but it is Kihu Yehudi. That there is something about, they think it is because he is a member of a different group, and that his membership in that group somehow trumps, no pun intended, his membership. I have to find another word that means that. I don't play cards very often, so something that overrides his commitment to his membership of the court consensus. Right? Let's see if we can examine more evidence that points to this notion. Well, one is understand that in a social religion, so to speak, what stands at the center is not just the will of the king, but the whim of the king. And this sense of Achashverosh comes through again and again in the embroidery of Chazal. And they will say of him again and again that he is the one who on one hand defiles the Kalim of the Beis HaMikdash, but on the other will order the rebuilding to continue. He's the one who kills his friend for the sake of his wife, and his wife for the sake of his friend. In other words, he is no particular position, no particular ideology in a stable way. Why do I say this? And this is where I make the distinction between the will and the whim. There is no question that a king, a Jewish king, operates as a shepherd, as an agent of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and of the Torah. But in the alternative visions of majesty that appear through the Tanakh, the king is the embodiment of a kind of a national will. If the king of Egypt is God, the king of Egypt is the guardian of what is called Mat, in Egyptian, the order of the world. Right? That's one of the reasons why the 10 plagues are so appropriate for the Egyptian context, because they undermine the order of nature and the order of life and show that Paro is incapable of preserving it. Right? So that is an attack on the very essence of his majesty / divinity. But when it comes to Achashverosh, this much later king, we have a figure who has no royal will, as is evidenced by the silly business of his edict against the Jews, which he says he himself can't even pull back. All he can do is issue another one. He's, you're right, and you're right too. He has this inability to manifest a stable direction or system of values. And indeed, that is what Chazal seem to have in mind, and this is why I quoted it from the Midrash Rabbah, cited from the Torah Temimah, about 3/4 of the way down. Hamolech. Hamolech means, according to the Midrash, Hamolech ve'idayin lo melech. Someone who is on his way. He is, so to speak, a work in progress. By this I understand someone who himself does not understand his job, his function. He lives in a state of anxiety. He lives in the attempt to become what it is that he's trying to tell the world that he already is. In short, he is a fraud. But as a fraud, this jello will, this wiggling spirit of whimsical instability, becomes something that is both open to manipulation, but also which carries great destruction in its wake. I really should tell you my favorite Jello story before we proceed. I believe this should be in your pantry. When the great actor Peter Lorre, have I told you this before? I probably have. When the great actor Peter Lorre came to Hollywood, he came as a refugee from Hungary. And in Hungary, he was already an established film star of great stature. And so he was received in Hollywood as a real dignitary. He didn't start at the bottom of the ladder. And they honored him with a banquet. And in those days, the catering style in Los Angeles was they would have a course of an individual Jello mold. Remember, like in the 50s, everybody thought Jello was the most amazing thing in the world. It was like the 2,000-year-old man's attitude towards saran wrap. They just loved Jello. So Peter Lorre had never seen this. So they placed this little Jello in front of him. And somebody saw him leaning down to the Jello and whispering, "You don't have to be frightened, little one. You don't have to tremble. I won't hurt you." I mention that because there are certain things one has to simply know. Thank you, Bella. In any case, so he is Hamolech. He's in process. But what happens? And who is the one who understands how to take advantage of this? Clearly, the Megillah makes some very astute connections. And we are told early on about the king's the king's inner council, right? They're given a listing, and I know I put them down for you. All right, just as you turn the page to the second side, a few more psukim from the first chapter. And it says, Hakorov Elov, Karshana Shesar, Admosa Vasar Shish Meres Sana Umumuchan. So Memuchan is the seventh of the seven. Two psukim later in Tes Zayin, who is the one who jumps out? Notice how he manipulates the king. Lifnei hamelech v'hasarim lo al hamelech livado of so Vashti hamalka. That famous speech where he exemplifies one of the most dangerous, inflammatory sentences ever spoken. Anytime you hear someone say, it's the principle of the thing, you know that you are in the presence of someone who is trying to elevate an emotion to a philosophy. Right? You didn't, sir. You remember that great scene in the movie Avalon? You cut the turkey. They cut the turkey. They cut the turkey. We're gone. Right? The whole family falls apart. Why? Because the honor of cutting the turkey was taken over by a starving family and not left to the uncle who was supposed to be the patriarch. Right? If you ask that uncle, you split the entire family over what? The carving of a dead bird. He would answer, it's the principle of the thing. This family has no respect. Respect is the issue we're discussing here, right? So what you have there is a feeling, an emotional reaction to a perceived slight, which often enough actually reflects the weakness of the person's own self-esteem, that they can be so deeply insulted by some gesture. Oh, but it's the principle of the thing. So Memuchan sees that Achashverosh is nonplussed. He's just made this announcement that Vashti is going to appear, and the announcement is she's not appearing so fast. So he's embarrassed. That's all. He's embarrassed. And he thinks that it reflects upon, remember we have a man, Hamolech, who is a fraud himself and aspiring to be regal. So Memuchan jumps in and says, in the different words, those famous words, it's the principle of the thing. And this is not about you, O kingly one, O worshipful highness. This is bigger than you. This is bigger than all of us. Family life in Persia depends upon this. And he fans the flame until Achashverosh either banishes or executes Vashti. And of course, what do Chazal tell us? Right on the spot, Memuchan ze Haman. That this is Haman. This is Haman catapulting himself from 7th place among the advisors to the point where we find the king elevating Haman. Gidal Hamelech Achashverosh es Haman, Vayinasehu, Vayosem es Kiso me'al kol hasarim asher ito. This is a threefold elevation. Al carefully points out, so does the Malvin, that you can't take an obscure factotum and suddenly have him become the vizier. Right, first you have to take this guy, first you have to make him a colonel, then you make him a brigadier general, and then, before you know it, he's the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. But it didn't take long. And what was his key qualification? The qualification was that he knew how to manipulate the moods of the king, to recognize that he had a weak monarch who could be manipulated in many directions. And it is said he's also the one who jumps in with the idea of the contest for the new queen, who had to meet many criteria. because they were afraid that no one would want to marry this guy because he didn't treat his wives right, like Henry VIII. Would you want to be number 6? I mean, you have to ask yourself, is that clear thinking? Look at the track record of your predecessors, right? You must always look at what happened to your predecessor before you take a position, because 9 times out of 10 could happen to you too. In any case. So Haman, when he sees that the mood is changing, so he jumps in, he suggests, we're going to get you a bride, only this time, guess what? We're not going to get like Vashti, who according to tradition had a great pedigree from the kings of Babylonia. We're not going that way again because she'll be too independent. We're going to get you someone, she's going to be gorgeous, she's going to be obscure. If need be, we're going to have the girls rounded up because in case the right one doesn't volunteer, etc., etc., etc. Showing a deep understanding of just how failing in confidence is this person whose whims are setting the direction for this crazy court where everyone is looking to their right and to their left to decide what they think, what they believe. And so, of course, the strongest side of this is where Haman is able, in the most casual way, to order the destruction of an entire people, because, okay, why not? Destroying entire peoples does not enjoy a strong moral antipathy, because nothing does. Because it seems at the moment, it seems like a good idea, the money is good, and why not? Even in fact, and this is where we'll circle back to see this capacity to be manipulated, to be moved from one extreme to the other, which of course eventually will be utilized in Esther's favor. We see it in some small details as well. Let's go back to one of the most famous things in the pantry. Why is this in the pantry? Because it is programmed into every Kriyas HaMegillah. Look with me, if you don't mind. Look at toward the bottom of the first page, the page that has sources at its top. You see there toward the bottom it says Esther Perek Aleph. Now from the pantry, V'hashkos bichlei zahav v'chelim mikelim shonim v'yein malchus rav kiyad hamelech. So the kelim mikelim shonim. I think we'll throw this to Abal Koreh. Gil, what's remarkable? What do we do with the truck there?
We switch to Eichot.
We switch to Eichot truck. We switch to Tisha B'Av mode because Chazal have told us that the Kelim Shonim, these strange vessels, so to speak, are what? What's their origin? That they are the Kelim of the Beis HaMikdash. And they're the Kelim of the Beis HaMikdash, and that the Jews are blamed because they take part in the feast just like everyone else, and brought into this. Now it's interesting how in this particular instance, the Pshat and the Drasha actually, I think, speak to one another. Because on one hand, Kelim Mikelim Shonim, according to Pshat, is that every time you would use a glass once, and then it would be, you'd get a new glass, right? They didn't wash, and they're all gold. So this is supposed to give you a notion of just how vast the store of of dishes was, it's like those, can you imagine, what is the most annoying thing at catered affairs? You get up to dance, and the guy comes and folds your dirty napkin. Now, is this supposed to fool you and make you think that this napkin is clean? I'll tell you the truth. You know what it does for me? Because I'm a little paranoid. I'm paranoid to think, what makes me think that it's my dirty napkin? Maybe it's that guy's dirty napkin, and he doesn't look that well. Once they're folded, they all look alike. I left mine to drape in my particular manner, and they ruined it. So I don't know what I'm wiping my face with at this point. Suppose that every time they did this, instead of that, they were really straight with you and they gave you a brand new napkin. Now this would be impressive. I should mention this to my friends who are making simchas, the kind of people who like it when the caterer takes more money from them. But we have a special service now. In addition to the filet mignon and the Cornish hen, we can offer you new napkins 53 times. Ooh! Ooh! This will only cost you $12,000 for a laundry service. This is good. Sharon, are you writing this down? Okay. So they're always thinking of things like this. So in the course, so the pshat is kelim mikelim shonim. That's pshat. But the drush, that these were the kelim of the Beis Hamikdash. Do you know what it took to become a kli of the Beis Hamikdash? Thing had to go through a process of, they were very specific, and they had, we were just coming off of Parshas Truman Tetzaveh, they needed to be anointed, they needed to be inaugurated, they needed to be preserved in a state of tahara. All of this has been flattened, as everything is just another, use it once and throw it out. Why? Because we're in a system where values themselves, the notions, the value concepts that underlie the very possibility of Kedusha, have been jettisoned. It's whatever's new is the only value. And Chazal were so clever, because in the Chazal that teaches us to do, that underlies the Trupp thing, there's more to it. That people, this is not in your pantry yet. But look at the psikta toward the bottom of the page. On the word shonim, it says, Hevi kelov uklei Elam. They brought his vessels and the vessels of Elam, right? Elam is a competing kingdom. Vayu kelov noim miklei Elam. And his were better. Kelov uklei Beis Hamikdash. They brought his vessels and the vessels of the Beis Hamikdash. Vayu klei Beis Hamikdash noim mikelov. And the vessels of the Beis Hamikdash were more beautiful than his. Why is this psikta so interesting to me in this discussion? Because it's a culture in which there are no absolute values. Everything is just about looking over your shoulder. Whether is what you have, is there something better? So people have relationships, people have possessions, people have opinions, but they never stop shopping because they're always looking around. Maybe I can do better, right? Maybe somebody else's is nicer. And where this process, that what happens here is that the process, imagine, he's the king of Persia, and they're bringing the vessels of Elam, which was a great and highly developed civilization, and it's just a matter of, okay, so which one's nicer? Where does the process stop? The process stops when they bring the kelim of the Beis Hamikdash, because the kelim of the Beis Hamikdash represent absolute value. When the Torah describes the Shulchan, and the Menorah, and the Aron HaKodesh, there is not one whisper that in 10 years we'll look around and we'll have someone design a better one. The idea is that if we could only, and you know this legend circulates that somewhere in the Vatican, the kelim of the Beis HaMikdash that were taken to Rome are hidden. If we could find the actual vessels of the Beis HaMikdash, would we then put out a contest to all of the Judaica artisans? Can you top this? This is the vessel created in response to Dvar Hashem, to the Word of God. We don't want another one. If we ever, in the third Beis HaMikdash, I don't know exactly how it's going to work out, if we have to design a new one, it will be with pain. Because we want the first one. And if we were in the second Beis HaMikdash, we got back to the Menorah, second Beis HaMikdash, and all of a sudden we could get back the one that Bezalel formulated, which one would we take? Take Bezalel's. The Sforno has a fabulous exposition where he says the Mishkan is the most perfect sanctuary that was ever built. Everyone after that was coming down. Why? Because you're talking about an absolute value which does not exist on a continuum of competition and comparison. That's why the process grinds to its halt with the kelim of the Beis HaMikdash. That's why when Mordechai will not bow down Kihu Yehudi, because he is still standing rooted in a set of true, absolute values which are not dictated by fashion and by the whims of an unstable king. They are instead the immutable Ratzon of the Melech Malchei HaMelachim, the will of the Creator of the universe, which was gifted to us so that we don't have to always be looking to our right and to our left and to be reading the latest polls. And what the Jews in subsequent literature are criticized for in Persia is for sitting at a banquet and allowing themselves to casually watch the vessels and the values of the Beis HaMikdash be tossed into the beauty contest of the Persian court. And even later on, when the Jews have the upper hand, when they are winning the battle of the whim, and public opinion is in their favor, and it says that the people in Persia are misyahadim, are becoming Jewish. Why? Because the fear of the Jews has fallen upon them. Because why? Because we're the flavor of the month. It is so pathetic. It's so pathetic because they don't become Jews because they've come to understand the fact that the Shem Hashem doesn't appear even there. That they are misyahadim. They are becoming socially Jewish. Because in the contemporary circle, it seems like the thing to do. Everybody's doing it. Everyone's doing it, scratching their heads and chewing it, right? It's that the ultimate worth, the rootedness in the eternal, has become eclipsed in this in this Persian context. And even the moment when Haman realizes that he is that his time is nearing its end is when Mordechai is sent out, Bilavush Malchus on the horse. What shall be done to the man whom the king desires to honor? It comes to me very easily because we used to have to sing that in kindergarten. What do you see? You see that Haman, what's Haman's craving? You see, this is the moment where he is actually revealed in the depths of his twistedness. Why? When the king asks him, what should be done to the man whom the king desires to honor? And he is sure that it is himself that the king is referring to. The fact that what he wants is to be clothed in the king's clothing and to ride the king's horse. Why is that also important? I'll ask you a wonderful question. What he's asking for? He's asking for precedent to be turned upside down. Because if you read even in the halachos of a Jewish king, the king's clothing when he died had to be burned. No one was allowed to ride the king's horse. All of that was the definition of majesty, was its uniqueness. And Haman, who in this valueless world, he wants to just get in there and do something that no one has ever done. He wants people to say, wow, this is the first time anyone's ever done that. Oh, wow. That's a new role. No one's ever done that before. It's so cool. But under the coolness is the worship of anarchy. That the very existence of institutions of reverence is an offense, to be used only as fodder for more gossip and for more social cachet. And at fault for this, Achashverosh himself. Because even if you read at the beginning of the Megillah, the parts that everyone goes, our eyes are glazed because they didn't say Haman yet, so we don't have anything to do with our kids. We're just hoping they're not going to flip out before things get interesting and they begin to be able to make noise. The patterns of the drinking in the court, the very pasuk after the kelim shonim, if you look toward the bottom of the first page, Vashtiach hadas ein ones, ki chen yisad hamelech al kol rav beiso la'asos kiritzon ish va'ish. So desperate is he, hamolech, this work in progress, this anxious, unstable, unconfident man. So anxious is he that everyone should approve that all rules have been abandoned. But even in the drinking, which you ever seen a film, the opposite extreme? You ever seen a film of a Japanese tea ceremony? That's the most amazing thing in the world. These people make out of a cup of tea. They make a ritual so refined, one in which every gesture is dictated by tradition and by a kind of a poetic spirit. Now, frankly, I'll tell you the truth, I think it's maybe a little exaggerated. It's not practical. After a Shabbos dinner, the capote comes out and they say, would you like a cup of tea? 2 hours later. By the time everybody gets dressed up and they do their little thing. First of all, they put those ladies in these dresses. They can't move very fast. Imagine trying to go back and forth to the kitchen in one of those Japanese outfits. You know, each cup of tea take you about a half an hour just to move it around, not to mention pouring and everything. So it wouldn't be practical, but it represents an ideal. It represents the notion of a life ordered by values and aesthetics, one in which things are done with grace, and through which one participates in an ancient tradition. It's as if you're drinking tea with everyone who has ever participated in this ceremony. And here we are in the court of Persia, at a royal banquet. You know how they make you crazy? I've never been in that situation, but when you go to dinner at the White House, or even more, you go to eat with the Queen in Buckingham Palace, how they hock you a chinik. You know, you must not this until the king, when you can't start your soup until the Queen starts her soup. You can't, you got to make sure you use this fork and that fork, and don't speak to the person to your right until you spoke to the person to your left, and after you speak to the person to your left, make sure you turn to the person on your right, and even if they're stone cold deaf, say something there, because they tell you, oh my, by the time, it's a wonder how those people ever get fat. They must eat between meals. Because from these kind of dinners, you couldn't get fat. You could barely get any food in your mouth. How they do with the little spoons. Oh, it's so adorable. And here we are in the court of Persia. Everybody do what you want. You want to drink, you know, like the royal cup of water that you must always drink from here. Because if you try to drink it from here, you'll pour it all over yourself. And do whatever you want. You want to pour it all over yourself. The Midrash says some people like to drink before they eat, some people drink after they eat. Everybody was doing whatever he wanted. Why? Because the king was so anxious that everyone should be happy all the time. His instability was generating this. Everyone, I want to treat you as if you were a king. You too can have whims and caprices. Do whatever you want, go crazy. So when Haman comes later on and says, you know what I want? I want to wear the king's clothes. I want to ride on the king's horse. He is very much in the zeitgeist of this court, which despises all traditional structures and which is responding to an ebbing and flowing tide of whim and emotion. And it is a sad world. And you know, it's very interesting, and I'm going to sort of wind this to a conclusion. When Mordechai is placed back in the cabinet, if you will, of Jewish history, removed from the book of the kings of Persia and Media, we're told, Ratzoi Lirov Echav, that he was, for the most part, accepted, for the most part pleased. But it would seem that for someone who had come from the Lishkas Hagozis, someone who had been a member of the Sanhedrin, who had been part of the administration of a system predicated on stable values, on eternal principles, when he sought to re-enter the pantheon of his own people, at least some had reservations. And I would offer to you that their reservations were that he had participated in a kind of idolatry. The idolatry which has no idol, which has no God, which has no shrine. The idolatry of a socially dictated set of judgments where everything was constantly in flux and subject to opinion and polls and, in essence, to whims of powerful individuals and those who would manipulate them. Once he has emerged as a figure in that system, the question of whether he could ever actually return to the world of the Lishkas Hagozis, whether the damage done by navigating in those waters would be such that he would never again be able to apply eternal principle consistently, is something that worried at least a minority, at least some of his co-religionists. And so I believe that in Megillat Esther, which is of course followed by the moment of Kimu v'Kiblu, when Am Yisrael stands up and accepts again what they had received at Har Sinai, where they come from this bath in a world which is homocentric, focused and centered on human whims and desires, and this time without a mountain over them, the mountain of divine will. They come back and they choose to be subject to the Ribono Shel Olam's will. Why? Because they have seen. They have seen what the world looks like when God is in eclipse. They have seen the decadence of which the human spirit is capable, and all it has to look to for direction is another human being or a group of other human beings. The terror of living in a world where all you have to go by is ka'omom elov yom v'yom, the chatter of the masses pleading with you, join us. Why? Because we're all doing it. Was enough to send them back to Sinai and plead with HaKadosh Baruch Hu to be the center of their lives, the center of their worlds, and to lead them forward in history.